roller coaster through time. The experience so overwhelming that if you didn't see it, you'd hear it. If you didn't hear it, you'd feel it. If you didn't feel it, you didn't ride it. And if you did, it wasn't your imagination. Chaos! The only ride of its kind in the world. Only at Opryland 89. Imagine.
Opryland USA is a long-defunct and little-known amusement park located near Nashville, Tennessee. The park closed in 1997 after 25 years of operation and was ultimately replaced by a mall. The park was well remembered by its former patrons and was quite popular until its closing. It even had a series of interesting and unique rides, including Screaming Delta Demon, an original intimate bobsled coaster which opened in 1984, Wabush Cannonball, an innovative aero corkscrew which was one of the first modern inverting coasters opening in 1975, and the focus of this video, a very rare Vekoma illusion coaster known only as Chaos. Going back to the beginning, the park began from a visit to Astroworld in the Astrodome in Houston, Texas by members of WSM Inc., who were looking to reinvigorate long-decaying areas outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and bring guests to their new Grand Ole Opry house. The park gave them an idea to build their own establishment to keep guests coming when shows were not active at the theater, just as Astroworld did with the Astrodome by utilizing its parking lot and spare land. With their plans in motion, the park was announced in 1969 before opening in 1972 officially. Though they only started out with a few rides, including an aero mine train known as Rock and Roller Coaster, not associated with Disney, they were still quite successful and quickly began expanding and adding more to the park, including the aforementioned coasters and rides, as well as improving the lively entertainment, scenery, and theming in the park as the years went on. Fast forward towards the end of the 1980s, the park's success was not slowing down, and the owners were finishing off a wave of long-term investment into the property, which included many new rides and amenities to stay competitive and grow. While they were winding down, they wanted to outdo all their already splendid previous editions and go all in for the last edition of their campaign with the most expensive edition ever made to the park. During this time, the park's themes of country music and old American charm were starting to age as American culture was moving out of the era of local folk songs and music Opryland based itself off of, and moving to the era of big TV, movies, books, songs, and stories that spread across and unified the entire nation. With the rise of modern pop music blockbusters and cable TV, the park was now in the era of Star Wars with special effects, modern tech, and newer trends. After research, consulting, and planning, it was decided the park would contact Dutch ride manufacturer Vekoma and spend $7 million, equivalent to about $15 million today, on a new special and experimental variant of their MK700 models known simply as the Illusion, which would be enclosed to provide riders with a mysterious but memorable and importantly highly themed experience using darkness, screens, and special effects which are certainly experimental and innovative for the time. With the park choosing to buy in after their fascination with the concept, Vekoma now needed the Illusion team to hire various artists and talented people to bring the project to life. And with another buyer in Belgium also waiting patiently for a result, they needed the right minds and talent. And to fill that very need, they hired film industry experts in order to construct the visuals for the ride via its special films which would play for riders during the experience, as well as to provide well-sequenced and placed sound effects to fully engage and immerse riders into the storyline. Those experts happen to be R/Greenberg Associates of New York, now known as R/GA, who integrated computer and digital technology into films such as in the 1978 Superman film's opening and other creations such as Alien, Predator, Home Alone, Braveheart, and many more. Though the company recently became a digital studio for general media and strayed away from computer imagery, their talent with visual effects was still top-notch, and they were still glad to help. For sound effects and audio mixing to sync riders with what they were both seeing and experiencing on the coaster, Vekoma hired Elias Associates, also of New York. This group was known for working with top musical talent of the day, and used their experience and expertise to construct a top-notch series of sound effects to impress riders and create just the right atmosphere for them to enjoy and stay engaged in. In addition, a main theme known as Bones on the Beach by musician Michael Honig was chosen for the ride as the main soundtrack riders would hear during the experience, and to establish and introduce the ride to park guests who are approaching the ride from outside. The coaster was even described as a coaster hybrid, likely referring to its integration with many movie and dark ride effects. With the final purchase made, Opryland USA officially debuted the elusive, intricate, and mysterious coaster known as Chaos for the 1989 season. The debut season proved to be a good year for both the American and Belgian parks, with the new rides proving quickly to be popular and well received by guests. So, what exactly was this ride like? And what made it so different or notable? Well, to answer that, let's look into the ride experience itself.
Note that since footage of this ride is practically non-existent, we will be using footage of this coaster's sister installation known as Revolution at Bobbejaanland, as it used the same soundtrack, ride films, and layout, as well as some other miscellaneous effects in order to represent the experience of Chaos. The footage will not completely replicate the American version, so be mindful that the original ride is different to what you see. Now that we're through with that disclaimer, the first and most easily noticeable feature of the ride is the facade on the outside of the show building, featuring the ride's entrance sign as well as scenery and theming in the form of giant gears and other simple industrial machinery such as pipes, as well as warning signs for leaks. A place which certainly sets the scene for what's to come in the actual ride. As you went through the entrance, you quickly rounded a corner and entered the building through a pipe with the words "Access to Control" labeled above the opening, and traveled through the indoor section of the queue. When Chaos opened, riders often waited in long lines outside the building before entering and waiting approximately 20 more minutes inside in what was referred to as the tunnel. A central theme to the attraction's plot, and labeled in many places, was access to control, with different levels the deeper you went inside the building. While in the tunnel, known in the story as access to control level 1, riders would see fog, strobe lights, warnings, and clocks. After passing through 3/4 of the tunnel, the riders would make a sharp 90-degree left turn into access to control level 2, where clocks would now be everywhere on the wall, ceiling, and flooring, what has been described as highly annoying ticking sounds surrounded those waiting in the queue. Fun fact, there was a concession stand right at the entrance to level 1 where you can buy treats, and even was said to have given the ride a cotton candy smell. After that, we would enter the decorated station, known in the ride storyline as Access to Control Level 3, as we waited to load the record-breaking 40-car-long train. The low lighting generates a continuous ominous atmosphere, and as we board, we hear the unsettling lines,
"Please move quickly to the station. Your time is running out."
Eventually, when the loading process was complete and riders were given and equipped with the special distortion glasses for the ride experience, the operator at the controls would say, "Access to Control Level 3 has been terminated, dispatching Chaos," and the train would dispatch out of the station and into an upward left turn onto a drive tire lift hill. This would bring riders into the ride's main chamber, in which the train would travel up a large spiral lift hill along the inner walls of the large building that housed the coaster. Well, in the giant room, which was nearly 100 feet in height, you would begin to hear ominous but curious music and sounds. While you circled the room, 2 giant round screens on the floor and ceiling of the chamber or separately specifically made films that would play in sync with each other. What you are seeing right now is the reconstruction of how the films played out on both the floor and ceiling and how they interact with each other. The screens would depict 2 clocks, with a pendulum swinging from the top one before eventually detaching and falling down to the bottom screen and loudly shattering the bottom clock into pieces. After that, imagery of warped faces and early computer-generated scenes of chaotic movement and visuals involving numbers, flashing lights, and bright visuals would appear on both screens, subjecting guests to the chaos of the coaster before they finally made their descent as the music's beat dropped. Fun fact, this was in fact one of the first coasters to ever incorporate CGI from the aforementioned hired Hollywood talent into the ride experience. at a time where even Disney or Universal were rarely doing it. But as for the rest of the ride, you would travel at a top speed of 31 miles per hour through long, wavy turns through the darkness of the rest of the building. As you sped through the building, you would see special images through your glasses made from laser projections, such as a wall of fire, breaking panes of glass, a starry universe made by lasers, a hall of lights, a time clock, and finally a green bullseye of all things. Additionally, the train would thunder through the main room one last time near the end of the ride, right next to the bottom screen before going over a last upward turn, before diving down into a set of brakes which slows down but does not stop the train. It made its final approach into the station as the front row riders enter the loading area with a bit of speed before gradually coming to a stop at the end of the platform. The overall experience of the first version of Chaos was clearly well made and an enjoyable one, and the clever tricks and features used likely contributed massively for the ride's initial success. So the ride was impressive when it opened, with many effects and features which were new or rare at the time. Many would not last. Although the ride was a success, there were still a few issues in the opening year which had to be addressed. Very often, the ride would have to go down due to the fact that loose articles would fall from riders on the lift tail and the flyby near the end of the ride and land on the bottom screen. This will require not only for the articles to be removed, but also the screen to be reset, which would take about an hour, which would quite often make for angry and impatient guests waiting outside of the ride for it to reopen or for the line to move. In addition, it was reported by ride operators that the projection system in the main chamber often had serious issues and rarely worked to its fullest proper extent, which became a heavy burden on the park in terms of maintaining the ride. Because of the loose articles and projection issues, both the top and bottom screen had to be permanently removed for the 1990 season, and the ride film was sent back to Europe, leaving only the film-based projections on the descent remaining along with the laser effects. Outside the ride, a new sign advertising Chaos as more chaotic than ever was put up, but many clearly saw that riders were underwhelmed and largely in the dark for the ascent, with only the music and maybe other on-ride sounds to keep them intrigued and entertained during the ascent, largely inhibiting the quality of the ride experience early on in its lifetime. In addition, some of the fog and strobe effects from the opening year in level 1 of the queue were also removed, likely due to difficulties and issues with sustained use of these effects on riders. However, this was not the end for the ride's effects and features. In 1993, a major update was made in an attempt to spruce up the ride as part of their very first Halloween event, which involved creating a new detailed and rich ride experience on par with what guests experienced in the opening year. The ride was now presented and sponsored by the early mobile phone service Bell South Mobility, while further changes were made to level 1 of the queue, with the clocks in the area being completely removed and placed near the emergency exit doors. The real changes took place in the main chamber. As part of the restoration to bring back a rich experience to the spiral lift section, a new theme was added to this section of the ride, one which still fit into the rest of Chaos' story and experience while doing something new. In the central room, the screens are replaced with a new set of large nuclear reactor in the middle of the room. And as riders climbed the lift hill, they would witness the giant reactor leak a bright red liquid onto the floor, as well as seeing smoke effects, flashing lights, and lasers go off in front of their very eyes. And as the ride reached the top, the reactor would truly hit critical mass and go haywire as it melted down, with the last sight the riders seeing is smoke being spewed out from the reactor throughout the room as Chaos truly commenced. Though the film projection screens on the descent were turned off and replaced with other effects and props, including a large alien-like monster named Leslie, who held its arm over the track as the cars passed under its arm. There was also a pass by the reactor by the train in the same place it passed the original screen. The new theme was designed by Rich Davis, who would later work with groups such as the Adri Design Group. Further updates in 1994 added even more of the ride, such as replacing the reactor with a more permanent version with different effects. Though the red liquid was gone, new creatures sprayed fog and taunted riders on the ascent. Additionally, the lines Code Yellow, all personnel to the reactor floor, all personnel to the reactor floor, would be heard as a train neared the top, and on the descent, a new animatronic fully replaced Leslie with a breathing effect to scare riders on their wild journey. A new entrance to the park opened near Chaos that year with some adjustments made outside of the ride to prepare for the opening. Though many of these impressed with changes, many guests enjoyed the 1993 version more, citing how the animatronic was barely noticeable and the effects were not deemed to be as good. Some interesting things occurred in the last years of the ride. In 1995, a new walkthrough near Chaos known as Quarantine opened for the annual haunt event during Halloween, which would use the trough of the seasonally drained out Rapids ride for the experience. Guests would have entered across from Chaos, seeing the notable sign featuring Chaos Chemicals as a tie-in with the coaster before walking through the concrete pathway opposite of the normal boat flow through the Rapids track. You went through several open and enclosed areas where patrons encountered monsters who were beating oil drums and also trying to get as close as possible without touching anyone. There would also be a journey through a cave where echoes of screaming could be heard, haunting guests even after they left. Next was a zombie disposal where you feel the heat of incinerators. You then exit right beside the loading platform for the Rapids ride. In 1996, it was announced a new QZR experience believed to be a laser tag arena in the ride building would come to the park but was cancelled, likely due to safety and logistical issues of including an arena under a moving roller coaster with minimal protection from loose articles being dropped. In the final year, it's seen many minor adjustments were frequently made to the ride to fine-tune it, and effects were added and then moved to other places in the park. The fog was removed and the consistency and well-kept effects were no longer present, with more basic features and theming being added to the ride, and the quality somewhat declined as a result of this. Though unfortunately, there was never a second chance for the ride to improve, as it would give its last ride around 8:55 p.m. on October 25th, 1997, where it permanently closed without warning, and dismantling had already begun when full details on the park's closing was released. The ride was stored at Old Indiana Fun Park outside of Indianapolis under ownership of Six Flags until April 2005, where it was decided the ride would be sold for scrap and never rebuilt. The only major surviving part was a train, which was sold to an unknown buyer. Speaking of the park's closing itself, Gaylord Entertainment, the operator of the park, looked into the prospect of opening a mall and entertainment site. After some consideration, they concluded that an entertainment center next to the well-known Opryland Hotel would be highly profitable and successful for the company. So much so that it was concluded that it would be a far better business venture for the company to build a mall and entertainment center for Nashville residents to enjoy and attend rather than maintain the existing park. Thus, the rather sudden decision was made to close and demolish the park and sell off as much of the remaining rides as possible. Today, Opry Mills stands on the former site of the park. However, the complex never became nearly as big as it was intended to become. And though the mall was still profitable, it was not a smash hit or the next big thing that it was hoped to be. And with the death of malls, many now look back at this decision as a hastily made attempt to achieve an unrealistic goal of being the next big retail player in the American South, which ultimately failed to bring the positive impact it promised, to the point of being a net negative, as amusement parks still easily have a position in the digitalized world, unlike much of retail nowadays. In fact, one official at the company was quoted as saying Opryland was successful, and it was successful when it was shut down. We weren't losing money. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Though Chaos might be gone, its European counterpart still operates today, even retaining one of its original screens, which the original 4 film is still being played to this day, as well as the original soundtrack and other effects from 1989. If you still want a taste of chaos and the Vekoma Illusion Coaster, then book a ticket to Belgium and head to Babylonland and hop on Revolution if you're curious on how chaos might have felt like to ride.
So, why exactly is this ride so obscure and forgotten? Well, the first and most obvious reason is its location at a long-closed and little-known defunct park, which itself is glazed over and ignored compared to parks like Geauga Lake or Astroworld, leading only people who lived in the local area and are old enough to have experienced the park, especially when the park's most thrilling ride built was an SLC from Vekoma, known as the Hangman. For those who don't know, these rides are notorious for being uncomfortable, forgettable, painful, and just not as good as other inverting roller coasters. Next, Chaos itself is a part of an experimental, rare, and uncommon coaster model which only had 2 installations ever built, and only in the year 1989. And even with the other rides still in operation at Babylonland in Belgium, it's often overshadowed by coasters like Fury, which opened in 2019. The fact that the Illusion coaster never became quite as popular as Vekoma hoped made sure that not a lot of people were as aware of it, since it was quite an uncommon ride experience, which is, of course, now extinct here in the US and can only be found at a somewhat minor European park. In short, its niche nature and its subsequent rarity are a big reason people overlook this model. Finally, the Illusion itself is not really that well liked by roller coaster enthusiasts, although it was well received by former Opryland guests. With its unique use of film, projections, and effects, other parts of the ride were not as warmly welcomed, as the ride was often compared to a Himalaya or Music Express due to its circular, broad, and wavy layout, likely influenced by the long trains. Though many did enjoy the ride's darkness and effects, others appreciated more big and intense rides and didn't really care for the extra gimmicks, leading it to be overshadowed and contributing further to its obscurity. So, why should it be remembered? First, Chaos was an ambitious and experimental coaster with an ambitious and rare use of storytelling, which enhanced the ride experience and defined it for guests. From the facade to the clocks in line and the elusive access to control, the ride truly was in a world of its own. Next, the ride made a few notable achievements, some of which have already been mentioned, such as the record-breaking 40-car trains, which even today are unbeaten, as well as the undeniably innovative and different use of film, sound, and scenery to create a far more rich ride experience. Such feats are even rarely matched today outside of Disney or Universal resorts. In essence, on top of story and setting, its technological and artistic features were outstanding. And finally, it should just be remembered due to the fact it tried to break away and do something different for once. As parks like Cedar Point and Kennywood were trying to build bigger and badder roller coasters with height, speed, and length records, Opryland did something different with a similar budget. Instead of going for records, they decided to create an interesting, unique, and memorable experience by entering uncharted territory and taking risks to bring guests in. While Cedar Point spent $8 million in the same year to build Magnum XL 200, Opryland chose with a similar budget to go with building something more intricate, mysterious, and creative to attract guests to come to their park, which allowed the park's investment to pay off over the 9 seasons the coaster operated.
In conclusion, Chaos broke new ground and was a unique and different experience and a breath of fresh air, which still wowed and entertained guests just as much as its more thrilling counterparts with different techniques. The effort and talent that went into making this coaster was notable, and it was a cool and immersive experience which will be sorely missed by those who are lucky enough to experience it. The story of this ride is quite remarkable, and it's quite sad that more people don't talk about this coaster. However, not all this ride is lost. You can still ride Vekoma MK700 such as Hornet at Wonderland in Amarillo, Texas, which, fun fact, used to operate at Astroworld as an indoor coaster, kind of like a smaller version of Chaos. Other versions of the MK700 other than Bobby Hunlund's Revolution includes Space Mountain VR in Taiwan, Halvar at Plopsaco, again in Belgium, and Mega Blitz at Wiener Prater. It would also be cool to find some more info on this coaster, such as more specific blueprints and specifications, or a full scan copy of the original ride films, or even a full POV of Chaos during its run at Opryland. If you have any of these, or just have additional facts and info that we left out, feel free to comment that down below.
And as always, peace out.
Someone